So when you're in your 40s, people expect you to be a certain way. People expect you to look and act and think a certain way, which I don't think I do. I don't think I look 42, thanks to my genes. Thank you, Daddy. And thank you, Mommy. So I just turned 42 a few days. What does it feel like to be 42? To be honest, I'm not sure I can answer that question because it's a very subjective question. We will all go through each of our milestones differently, including our ages, right? So I recently turned 42 a few days ago. Yay, happy birthday to me. And it's been wonderful. It's been great. I had a very quiet birthday because now I'm back in Indonesia again with my husband. So there wasn't, no family, no friends around to celebrate with. But I did get a few messages and a few phone calls, which I absolutely appreciate. So if any one of you watching today, if you sent me a message or if you called me, thank you so much for your wishes, your prayers. I appreciate it so much more than you can imagine. Thank you so much. So today I would like to share some of the things that I have been reflecting on since I turned 42. Actually, since I turned 40, to be honest, because these were things that I never really thought about deeply enough. I never really had any profound feelings about them until I turned 40. That was a bit of a traumatic experience for me, to be honest. I didn't think was going to be a big deal when I turned 40, because for me it was just like, oh, it's just another year, right? But it was a big deal for me, and I'm going to be touching on that a little bit. So I will be talking about going through a bit of a midlife crisis, because now I can say somehow I am a midlifer. I mean, what age are you supposed to be a midlifer? I'm not so sure, but it depends on life expectancy and all of that. But anyway, I'm going to be talking about having a midlife crisis, and I'm going to talk about physical and mental health, as well as priorities in life, relationships and all of that. So when I was in my 20s, these were not things that I thought about profoundly, like I said before. I did have ideas about what midlife crisis is. Until you've lived something, until you've lived through an experience, you can never really understand it. You can never fully grasp the enormity of it. So I was aware of what midlife crisis was, but I had never lived through it, so it wasn't something that I could really identify with. And when I turned 40, it hit me like a ton of bricks that, hey, girl, you are in the dreaded 40s. This is the time in your life when your goals, if you haven't achieved your goals yet, it means that you're a failure. If you haven't, had the ideal life that people strive for, that women strive for, if you haven't had those successes, like having a family, having children, having a home, career success, financial stability, having traveled or haven't had certain experiences in life, if you haven't reached those milestones yet, it's kind of either, the time is ticking, the clock is ticking, clock is against you, or you're a failure, And I went through a period of panic, high panic, but I'm glad that I was able to pull myself out of it myself, with the help, of course, of my family and a few friends, but mostly by my own sheer willpower. I have a lot of that. I've always had a lot of that, and I'm really glad and grateful that I have a lot of that, and I still do. So I was able to pull myself a little bit out of that. But the things that went through my mind was in relation to me not having a child, for example, with my husband. So I have a son before I met my husband, and when we got together, we did think about having kids of our own, because I just felt like they would be the most beautiful kids ever. I felt like they would be really gorgeous. You know, I wanted my own gorgeous half white, half black kid. But it was my willpower again and my mindset. If you know anything about me, you know that I'm very pragmatic, I'm very realistic. And that mindset was able to get me through not having had a child for my husband. You know, he has two of his own, I have one of mine. So we just felt like we were okay having three kids. But it wasn't just that, you know, there were other factors. Maybe I will talk more about that in another video, but there were other factors that led to the decision not to have a child. And I do not regret that. I don't regret. There are days when I would think about it and say, oh, I wish I'd had that. But when I weigh everything up, it's not a decision that I regret. So, yeah, when I turned 40 and now that I'm 42, it's still something that I think about, like the fact that I didn't have a child for my husband. Ugh. So I had this, you know, period of panic, like, you know, I'm 40 and I don't know where my life is going, or I'm 40 and is this the life that I really want? Is this what I really wanted for myself? Is this how I want to live my life? You know, and I'm really grateful that now that I'm 42, I have been able to overcome that panic. I've been able to push past that anxiety and found so much peace and joy in my life. And I know that it has a lot to do with my resiliency. I have a mindset that is really tough, but tough in a positive way. I have a very positive outlook on life. I'd rather see the glasses half full than half empty, because the alternative to me just doesn't make sense. It just isn't fulfilling enough. I don't, I, it's not, I'm not avoiding, I don't avoid negative things. I do know that negative situations and circumstances happen, because they do happen to me as well, but I'd rather deal with it when it happens than worry about it before, right? So the fact that I started worrying worried me. The fact that I started worrying about life and about how I was going to spend the latter years of my life actually put me in a state of apprehension. So I was worried about the worrying, and that made it worse, right? But I'm really grateful that I have the pragmatic mind, the realistic mind that I have, and I was able to calm myself down and just reassure myself and say, this is what every human being has to go through on earth. Every human being fortunate enough to live this long. For some people, it might not be good fortune, but I don't know, there are circumstances. We all have different circumstances in life, but all things being equal, all things being well, if you live long enough, if you live long enough to be 42, 50, 60, then you're fortunate to have that much life, you know. And it was important for me that I lived the life that I had rather than worry about the life that I don't have, you know, worrying about the future. So, yeah, if you're in your 40s, did you go through any similar thought ideas? Have you been through midlife crisis yet? Is it something that you think might happen in the future? I'd like to know. Please share your thoughts and your ideas with me. And if you're not in your 40s yet, this is something that you have to keep in mind that might occur sometime, you know, along the line, somewhere down along the line. Now, in terms of health, I feel like I am where I should be as a 42-year-old. But on the other hand, I also feel like I can be better. You know, I can go to the gym more often. I could eat better. I could eat cleaner. I could just do things a bit better. But I feel that I have good health. I know that I have good health. I'm in good physical health, good physical shape, and I am in the best mental health that I have ever been in, to be honest. I don't think I was this healthy mentally as I was in my 20s, even in my early 30s. And, I read recently that the age group that is the most depressed, or should I say, the group of people who experience and exhibit the most depression, is the 40-year-old group, specifically females. And I'd like to say that even though that statistic might be right, it doesn't mean that that has to be your reality. You don't have to play into what is expected of you. So if you work on that before you get to your 40s, then you can prevent that kind of depression from happening. And to do that, in my case anyway, I can only speak for myself, because I feel like things like happiness and joy and even midlife crisis is very subjective, right? So from my point of view, the way I see things, what has helped me to retain my positive outlook on life, I would say it's been due to me leading a life of gratitude, a life where I count my blessings, a life where I see the beauty around me rather than the ugliness around me, a life where I acknowledge the ugliness and I acknowledge the bad and the negative, but I'm able to push past that and focus on the positive. I feel like I have to emphasize that. Focus on the positive, focus on the good. Because any other way just doesn't work for me in my circumstance, in my situation, for my life. It just doesn't work. And I want my life to work. I want my life to work out. And just because I'm in my 40s now doesn't mean that it's time for me to let go of everything good. We often put a negative connotation to growing older. We often see it as our doom, growing older. Because, of course, the older we get, the closer we get to the end of our life here on Earth, right? But what if, because I don't know what's going to happen afterwards, right? So what if I live my life honoring life itself? What if I spend the rest of my days appreciating life, the gift of life, see it as a gift? I know that it's probably not the same outlook that many people have, that some people have, but in my case, I see it as a gift. And I want to be a gift to others around me. And I feel like if I am exhibiting negativity, if I'm exuding negativity, that's going to affect the people around me. And I'd like everybody else around me to have great lives. I'd like people to enjoy their lives. And if I'm not enjoying my life, I know at least the people who are close to me, I know that they won't enjoy their lives because they would be worried about me. They'd be anxious for me. And I don't want that for them. So I'm not just doing it for this reason. I'm not just seeing or having a positive outlook on life for this reason. I'm also doing it for myself, ultimately. So there is a bit of selfishness as well as selflessness about me having such a mindset. But I feel like it's paramount to a happy existence. My mental health has never been better. And being 42, I can say that now I can confidently say that I know, or I have my own ideals, my moral ideals. I have a very high standard, morally and otherwise. And I like to think that I am stable. I like to think that I have a stable mental state. I hardly get very anxious. I hardly get angry. I often, more often than not, my anger is always, the righteous anger kind of thing, like, unfairness, injustice, and disobedience, but I don't have any kind of personal anger against anyone per se inside of me. I am a multitude of traits in one, and I'm very comfortable with who I am right now. I love that I'm confident in myself. I love that I've been able to shed some of my negative traits over the years. I love that I've been able to find the current version of myself, because I don't think that you can ever fully find yourself. Finding yourself is a lifelong endeavor. It's something that you will never completely find, but you will always find bits and pieces of the puzzle as you grow older and older and older. If you're older than me, please correct me if you think I'm wrong, if you think that there's a certain age that you get to where you are fully yourself. I just don't feel like that's possible, at least in my case. I feel like I will always be finding bits and pieces of myself. And I'm not on a journey right now of finding myself, but I am not completely found, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to talk about some of the things I wish I knew in my 20s. I've got some things I wish that someone had told me, and I got some things that I wish I knew I'd been right about. I wish that someone had told me that I didn't need to waste 4 years of my life pursuing a degree that I was only pursuing because it was what my society felt was going to lead to success in life. So I did sciences, and I still love sciences, but the branch of sciences that I studied at school wasn't really something that I wanted. It was just because my parents were supporting me in that direction, and it's as a result of, societal influence. I wish that someone had told me, just, find what you really love. Because now that I'm doing what I love, I can see the difference. I feel the difference in my life. I wish that someone had told me that my knees would give out on me, even though that happened much earlier in my mid 30s. But I wish that someone had actually told me about taking good care of my knees. It didn't matter if I was slim and I didn't have a lot of weight bearing down on my balls. My bearings, my joints, yeah. But I needed to have taken better care of my knees. I also wish that someone had told me that mental health was a necessity, that mental health was actually a thing, coming from a society where mental health is a taboo. Talking about mental disability is a taboo, or you just get thrown into a psychiatric ward and everybody thinks you're mad or possessed by the devil, right? So I wish that someone had told me about mental health and the importance of mental health. I also wish that someone had told me, you know what, you don't need to struggle hard in order to live a fulfilled life. You can struggle less. I wish that someone had told me that I didn't need to belong if I don't feel like I didn't belong. I didn't need to force myself. I didn't need to forge myself into or mold myself into groups and categories that didn't feel true or didn't feel right to me. I wish also that someone had told me that I would be okay. I wish someone had really told me that I would be okay and giving me a kind of reassurance about the future. I didn't get that growing up. I didn't get that from my surroundings. I didn't get that from anybody around me. I had to be my own support system most of the time, emotionally especially. Now, I wish, on the other hand, that I'd known that I was right about my decisions, or should I say about certain decisions that I didn't make in my 20s, like not pursuing a job in modeling, like not being interested in what most other girls were interested at the time, mostly material, acquiring material stuff, you know, clothes and makeup and all of that things, all of those things. I wish I had known that I was right about the fact that I didn't fit into my Nigerian society, not because I felt better, but just because there were lots of things that didn't agree with me. There were lots of practices that didn't agree with me, and still don't, by the way. And I wish that I'd known that I was right about the fact that not many people think the way that I do. And those who think the way that I do are so sparsely populated that it's difficult to get everyone together, you know? I don't know if you know what I mean. Like, I have never been one to go with the herd. I've never been one to be swayed by a crowd mentality. I don't like crowds anyway. So following the crowd has just never been my thing. Yeah. Yeah. So I wish I'd known that I was right about that. And I wish I'd known the last one. I wish I'd known that I was right, that I would be okay, that I would make it in my own way, and that my own way would be sufficient. So if you're in your 20s and you're watching this, I want you to know that there are some things that you will be right about and that you are likely right about when it comes to yourself, when it comes to your life. And on the other hand, at the same time, there are so many things that you do not know, and you should be willing to listen. You don't have to learn from people's mistakes. You can learn from your own mistakes, but you have to have a discerning mind. But if you feel like you want to make a mistake, but in a wise manner. I don't know if that makes any sense. You know, for example, let's say you want to make your own mistakes when it comes to relationships, romantic relationships. You still have to be aware, though, that some people are assholes. You still have to treat people with caution while you're experimenting, if that makes sense. Yeah. Don't let anybody lead you down a dark hole. Don't let anybody convince you of things that you know are wrong, or of things that you know do not align with the person that you are at that moment. Always be true to yourself. I wish someone had told me that. So guys, that is all I have for you today. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to let me know in the comments. Give this video a like, share it with anyone who you think might find useful, and subscribe if you haven't yet. Okay, so until the next video, my name is Isabella. Ciao, ciao.